Well, hello there. Today we're going to be talking about identifying and classifying angles. Now, just in case you aren't sure, identifying angles means we're going to be able to name the angles, and classifying them means we're going to be able to put them into groups. So let's get started. An angle is a figure formed by two rays with a common endpoint called the vertex. So let's take a closer look at what I mean. If we have ray AB and ray AC, we have created an angle. Here we have our two rays with our common endpoint, which in this case is... Whoa, what happened here? Sorry. Sorry about that. And here we have our common endpoint, which would be our vertex, which would be point A. Now, there are four different types of angles. So let's take a peek at them. There is an acute angle, which means that an acute angle is between 0 degrees and 90 degrees. This is the smallest type of angle. Next we have a right angle, which is exactly 90 degrees. And this little box here is telling us that that is a right angle. The next, oops, sorry, I forgot to put right angle. Next we have an obtuse angle. And an obtuse angle is between 90 degrees and 180 degrees. And our final angle is called a straight angle. And this angle is exactly 180 degrees. Now, these different types of angles are classified by their measurement. As you can see here, all of them are chosen or are named because of how many degrees they measure. So, it's important to get these down. Acute is the smallest angle. It's nice and cute and tiny, and that's, like I said, between 0 and 90 degrees. A right angle is also called a 90-degree angle, and you're going to notice that by the box we have. An obtuse angle is the largest angle, and that's between 90 degrees and 180 degrees. And finally, a straight angle, or straight line, is 180 degrees. Excellent. All right, so let's take a look at this figure here. Here we have a near perfect pentagon, or excuse me, hexagon, and we've created a bunch of angles. Now, if we wanted to look at angle ANE, for instance, the first way we would write it is we would draw a little miniature angle and then write ANE. E, and that is representing this angle here. Now, if we wanted to determine what type of angle this is, or classify this angle by the four different types we put it in, we would call this an obtuse angle. Because, as you can see here, the vertex, which is always that middle letter, is going to be more than 90 degrees. It's going to be between 90 and 180 degrees. Now, if we were to go ahead and look at angle NBC, we would notice that our vertex is going to be right here, and the angle is actually this angle right here. Now, this angle is less than 90 degrees, so this angle would be called an acute angle. I would like you to go ahead and tell me what angle let me fix that. NDC is going to be. So please go ahead and figure that out for me now. Okay, great job. As you could tell, that was an acute angle as well. All right. Now, we know now what the four different types of angles are. Now we need to talk about when we combine two of these angles. So, when we combine angles, they can be one of two things. They could be considered complementary angles, or supplementary angles. Now, when we have a pair of complementary angles, the two angles measure up to 90 degrees, meaning their sum is going to be 90 degrees. So an example of this would be if we had an acute angle that was 32 degrees and another acute angle that was a little bit larger, which measured to 58 degrees. These would be considered complementary angles because the sum of their measurements equals 90 degrees. Now, supplementary angles are also going to consist of two angles. And supplementary angles are when two angles sum is 180 degrees. So, if we had an angle that was, let's say, 55 degrees, we would call that an acute angle. And then if we had another one that was an obtuse angle, that was 125 degrees, these would be considered supplementary angles because when we add up their measurements together, they equal 180 degrees. So, a pair of supplementary angles and one angle measured at 105 degrees, what would our other angle have to measure? We're going to call that x degrees. Remember, supplementary, let me try that again. So these are supplementary angles, and they have to add up to 180 degrees. So please pause it now and figure out what our missing angle is. All right. Well, if you said the missing measurement was 75 degrees, you would be correct because 105 plus 75 would equal 180 degrees. Nice job. All right, so we've learned about the different types of angles, what an angle is, what a vertex is, complementary angles, supplementary angles. Now let's talk about adjacent angles. So adjacent angles share a vertex and a side, but have no interior points in common. Let's take a look at what I mean by that. So here we have 4 different angles. Now, a pair of adjacent angles would be angle 1 and 2 because, as you can see, they share a vertex and they also share a side. So we would call those adjacent angles. But there's no other common points other than the vertex in that side. Now let's talk about vertical angles. These are formed by 2 intersecting lines and are opposite one another. So, if we go ahead and look back at our previous, we would say 1 and 3 are intersecting angles because, as you can see, we have our 2 intersecting lines and these 2 angles are opposite one another. Now, vertical angles also have another special feature about them because vertical angles are also what you would call congruent angles, meaning that the angles have the same measurement. So angles 1 and 3 would be equal to the same thing. Now, let's mix this up a little bit. If we have straight lines here, okay, or straight angles, and we'll call this angle 4 and angle 5, okay, that means angle 4 is equal to 180 degrees. So angles 1 and 2 would be considered, you got it, supplementary angles. So if angle 1 is 115 degrees, please figure out angles 2 and angles 4 for me. All right, well, if you said angle 2 was 65 degrees, you would be correct because 65 plus 115 is 180. And angle 4, which is a vertical angle with angle 2, would also be 65 degrees. Can you take a guess what angle 3 is going to be equal to? That's right. Since it's congruent with angle 1, it would be equal to 115 degrees. All right, so I want you to try some of this stuff out on your own. Please go ahead and do pages 333 to 334. And I'd like you to try (2) through 32 evens. All right, thank you and have a great day.
Made with Doodlecast Pro.